Picture this. The journey ahead starts here together, and together we can build a brighter future. You are listening to Illuminating Hope, a podcast of Hope House. Dr. Dowd graduated from Rockhurst University with her Bachelors of Science degree in mathematics. She then received her Doctor of Chiropractic from Cleveland Chiropractic University in Overland Park, Kansas. She firmly believes that pain is never random. There is always an answer. Dr. Dowd, we're glad you're here.
Thanks. It's really great to be here.
With you doing a lot of holistic care, I know that somebody who's experiencing or witnessing domestic violence, it can have long-term mental and physical effects on the body. Can you share a bit about your background and also any experience treating survivors of domestic violence or anyone who has dealt with any kind of trauma?
Absolutely. I guess I'll start with my background. Hope House is very close to my heart because I grew up with a family of domestic violence. We had gone to shelters before, in and out of shelters. My first marriage, he decided to abuse me there mentally and physically. And then my second marriage, I thought I was out of it, and the same thing happened. And so it's amazing how you repeat those patterns. After the second marriage and those things happening, I realized that I felt disempowered, I guess, that I didn't have power over my own life and that I had to rely on other people to be able to support my family and all of that, and I really didn't like that. And so I chose to go to school. I chose to go to get therapy because the thing was that I didn't want to find another guy like that. And evidently that was my MO. Hey, if you want to be an alcoholic, financially bankrupt me, and then physically and mentally abuse me, hey, come see me. And by the way, if you don't want to work, that's fine.
I think a lot of people can relate to everything you just said.
It really is a pattern that you have to interrupt. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes it's very hard, and it's different for everybody. For myself, I chose to go the education route because I believe that if I gave myself that education, that I would be able to empower myself and then also be able to support my family, and I didn't have to have or rely on anyone else to help me give my family, my children, my daughter, the things that she needed. So then it took the pressure off of me having to look for a husband to be able to help support my family, because a lot of times we get into that situation. The education that I went to school a lot longer than what was necessary. So my mom told me that as long as you're taking one class at a time, eventually you'll get there. And that was very motivating to me. So that's what I did. I was a single mom, and I was working full time, and I was taking part-time classes, and I just kept hammering away. And she told me, go for the associate's degree, then go for the bachelor's, and then figure out what you want to do. And that's what I did. But I'd always wanted to be a chiropractor. But the thought of going to school for 8 years as a single parent was just way too overwhelming to me. So my mom says, just go for the associates, go for the bachelor's, just keep moving forward. That's what you have to do, is just keep moving forward. Because sometimes we get stuck. And she says, what are you going to be doing in 3 or 4 years from now anyways? Are you going to be graduating and starting a career that you've always wanted? Or are you going to be still in the same situation, still not making very much money, still not supporting yourself the way that you want, and still in the same apartment that you don't want to be? And that made sense to me. So that's what I did. It took me 8 years to get my undergraduate, and through that I lost my mom and my dad in between there, so within 2 years apart. So it was hard. It's not easy. And then I went on to get my doctorate in chiropractic, and it was the best decision I ever made. Plus, my daughter decided to be a chiropractor, and we were in school the last 2 years.
That's amazing.
Of school.
That's awesome.
And she used to crack me up because she would try to kiss me and hug me in the hallways goodbye, and I'd be like, honey, they don't know that we're mother and daughter. Don't embarrass me. You're embarrassing me. And she'd be like, kiss me more, And so,
that's so funny. Normally it's the daughter that would be embarrassed.
Exactly.
That's great.
I graduated in 2014, and she graduated in 2017 and went to work for me and opened up a practice in Green Valley. The rest is history.
I love that your experience, your personal experience, actually pours into your work as you treat anyone with any kind of trauma. So tell me about some of the things that you look for with your patients. Do you do some sort of an intake and maybe find out a little background about them, or how does that work when a patient comes to you? what's the next steps?
Great question. The chiropractic theory was done by D.D. Palmer back in 1910 when it started, and he believed that thoughts, trauma, and toxins were the reasons why people didn't hold their adjustments. The whole definition of chiropractic is that if you have a misalignment of the spine, that put pressure on the nerve and it caused nerve irritation. And what we do is we go in and we correct those misalignments. So when patients come into our office, we do a full new patient exam. And that's a physical, orthopedic, and neurological exam on day one. And that way we can have a complete understanding. However, though, one thing I have found with abused women or men, they're very good at hiding it. They're masters at hiding it. Even though I am mandatory on reporting, there are exceptions in there. And so, like, if I see a minor or if I see an elderly or a disabled person being abused, I am mandatory to report that. But an adult, sometimes if you report that, the outcome is even worse. I have found that it's more important to be able to have in that exam the conversation. You have to gain trust. And so by going through their past physical history, such as past injuries, past surgeries, and things like that, sometimes that'll give me a little bit of a highlight. If they've had trauma, that can give me some history of it. Or, I have had situations where the husband came in with them and the husband wouldn't even allow them to talk. And you can tell that the woman was just completely shut down. But those are situations that are very, very difficult, and you have to really navigate through that. And sometimes you'll leave pamphlets around like in the bathroom and stuff like that and hope that they will take that, because if you try to address it directly, it could cause more problems. You just hope that you get that doctor-patient relationship that they will start telling you.
You've hit on a couple of things that are so important. One of those is the shame that goes with domestic violence and the hiding. Hiding isn't just about shame, it's also about fear and protection, that it can be a protective force as well. But I think that's really important, and that you as a healthcare provider are the trusting individual that person then needs and knows that they can then access you for help if and when they're ready for that. I think that's key, because so many times domestic violence survivors are isolated. They don't have family or friends or people in their corner to help them. So being able to find someone who could be in their corner is life-saving.
Yes. Most of the time they've been in past domestic violence situations and they were out of it or staying at another person's home. That's where what I want to do is I want to be the person that gives them the resources. Here's where you can do, because I can't protect you, but what I can do is I can give you Hope House. I can give you your Missouri Coalition's number. I can give you the domestic violence number. There's shelters in there that will protect you and will help you with this. I've seen a lot of disabled people that are just not properly taken care of. Been a real shocker for me that I've seen those people. It's really hard for them to step up for themselves, because this person may be their only caretaker, and what is their other option? They don't know what their other option is. It gets shipped to some kind of a home or something like that, so it's very scary for them too.
You brought up a great point about being a mandated reporter. Some of us are and some of us aren't here at Hope House, depending on our position. But Marianne and I I asked the question to her one time, why are adults not part of that mandated reporting? And she said it could be even more unsafe if you report domestic violence. If somebody would come to the house, that's a scary thing for any domestic violence survivor. I can tell you, as far as I'm concerned, if somebody would have came to my house when I was living with my abuser, that would have been detrimental for me and for weeks to come.
I think it's also about the ability to make your own choices. I mean, when you're in a domestic violence situation, those choices are taken away from you. You are not able to lead your life the way that you want to lead your life. You're being controlled by another individual. And I think that it can seem counterintuitive to say that somebody should be able to make the decision about what they're going to do with their life. Whether we think it's a safe option for them or not, they really do have the opportunity and legally have the right to make their own choices. Now, when you're dealing with children or elderly, those are protected classes, and those are people who they don't have the ability to do that. So somebody needs to step in to help them. But as an adult, without any of those other factors in your life, you really should be able to make your own choices. And sometimes those choices have very severe consequences, but they are in the right to be able to do that themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And like you said, it's sometimes reporting that can make it even worse. And also, you've just lost the trust of that patient, doctor confidentiality. And so where you could have maybe through several more visits been able to talk with them and encourage them and get them to help them get the courage to make that step, you lost that opportunity and it shut them down. And And so I feel as though there's more opportunities there to be able to help.
Again, I think that's key. What you're saying is that you are building that relationship, you're building that trust, and you are going to be that person that they can rely on and they can turn to. And then when they're ready, if they're ready, sometimes people aren't ever ready to make a different decision, but if they are, then they now know what their options are because you've given them the resources. You haven't said, here, you must do this. You've said, here are the resources available to you. What do you want, if any of them? And then helping them to be able to decide what their next steps are going to be.
Can you explain the connection between domestic violence and different mental health conditions or PTSD and what that does to the body?
Absolutely. So, it goes back to the thoughts, trauma, and toxins theory. We believe that that's one of the main reasons why we don't hold our adjustments and how it physically impacts the body in not only in a physical, but in a neurological. Like with trauma, that's the physical part. So I talk about when they get hit in the head in the domestic abuse. That happened to me. It's very easy to get whiplash. With the whiplash, they've shown just from car accidents that it damages the discs, as an example. And when it damages the discs, then they start to degenerate more, which increases the arthritis, or it accelerates the arthritis in the spine. And so the same thing happens with, like the domestic abuse, that kind of thing. They're getting hit, and this damage can hurt the body. And the body, sometimes the body can heal it all, like a broken bone, but sometimes the body, like the discs and things like that, it can only do so much, and then it starts to degenerate and get the arthritis. And then the toxins can be chemical, because sometimes, we will dive into alcohol to try to forget, or there may be drugs involved, and that affects the nervous system and makes the muscles tense up, and you have falls and accidents just from doing stuff like that. So you further traumatize the body. And then the thoughts, I think, can be just as damaging to somebody because of the fact of that the thoughts puts the body in a fight or flight situation. And that emotional fight or flight situation can make the nerves in the nervous system in overdrive, in that sympathetic overdrive. And when it's in an overdrive like that, your muscles are very tight, and it starts to it'll pull the spine out of alignment, which puts more pressure on the nerve, causes more nerve irritation, and they have more neck pain or low back pain and things like that. As a chiropractor, we're able to go in and restore that mobility to be able to calm down the nervous system. Some people get misdiagnosed like with fibromyalgia because they're just in such a sympathetic response from all of the trauma. All of their nerves hurt. Everything hurts in their whole body. If you can get some of that calmed down, then the body will start to calm down. The nervous system will start to calm down. And then, if they've gotten themselves out of the abusive situation, it'll help free up them to help work on the mental health side, because it's really hard to be able to deal with both at the same time. They're both equally traumatizing. And the PTSD, that part, you've got to, address that. I know for me, I've had to do that. And there's still triggers that get me. I had a patient one time that whenever he came in, and he didn't mean anything by it, but he had a big old buckle, and he would take his belt off and he'd go whoosh, like that, and take it out. And that would traumatize me every single time. I'd have to look away from him and just think about something else, because of that would just trigger me. And I realized that it was because of past domestic violence.
Have you seen that PTSD, sometimes the alignment is worse or in the middle of the trauma?
It just depends on, they're still in the middle of the domestic violence situation. Every visit can be a different situation. I get a whole bunch of women that have bruises, and it's very, very obvious. I do get a lot of women that have a lot of pain that are similar to, they've been misdiagnosed as like fibromyalgia, as an example. And so by addressing the subluxations or the misalignments of the spine, you can get some of that to calm down. We use actually an activator instrument. When we talk to women, sometimes, a manual adjustment is too aggressive for them. And so we have an instrument that we use, and it's called an activator. We can use that to get the joint to move, because it's about getting that mobility. It's those conversations of trust to be able to find out what's the best kind of way to be able to get this person feeling better. The PTSD side, you have to really talk with them about, this is what I'm going to do. You have to walk them through through, and you have to make sure that they're comfortable with all of this, and you don't just go in guns a-blazing and start just adjusting people like crazy, because of sometimes that can boomerang or rebound back on them. To them, it's like, it could be another trauma to them in their brain because they're PTSDing and they're reliving it. So I have found I walk patients through it. You have to be very, very sensitive to all of that. I get a lot of PTSD from the Army, from our vets, and I have to walk them through it because you never know what is going to trigger them. It's about really listening.
It just really does seem to come back to that relationship, having that relationship with your patient and being that trusting individual that they can come to, because I think in order to get relief from some of these things, they also have to go through it. You have to go through it in order to get past it or to get, to move beyond it, and that you need somebody to help you do that. Often you need somebody to hold your hand and say, we're going to do this together. You really are that person, people, and I think that's wonderful.
A lot of times people will come to us as chiropractors before they will go to their primary care, which is interesting because we are actually licensed under primary care physicians. And we've had to take all the same classes as medical school. We just take more physiology, less pharmacology. And one of those reasons is to be able to pick up on the medical side, because people will come to, especially like being in smaller cities, I've had people coming in and clutching their chest and saying, I know it's just a rib out. And I'm like, I know it's not. Or, kidney pains and things like that where they think it's just they've got low back problems. I get a lot of outside the box cases that come in. Having that more rounded education has been really, really helpful to be able to get people, where they need to be. It may be, not my expertise. I like to play in my own little field. I'm a chiropractor. I don't want to be a medical doctor. I don't want to be a pharmacist. I don't want to do any of those things. I don't want to sell supplements, and I don't want to sell pillows. I just want to be a chiropractor, and I just want to adjust patients, and I want to help them feel better. And I want to help them get empowered to understand why they're having recurring pain. A lot of times they're doing certain things outside of the domestic violence, but they're doing certain things like they're always, on the floor, crisscross applesauce with the kids, bending over, and they're staying like that. Well, that's aggravating their back. So helping them understand when they come in and they go, yeah, I have increased pain today. Oh, well, when did that start? And asking those questions. And then they say, oh, well, it happened on Saturday. Well, take me back 2 hours from when you noticed it. And then they start going through and they're like, well, I did sit with the kids and I put away toys and then I vacuumed and then I cleaned the bathtub and then have those ever hurt you before? Have they ever bothered you before? And asking those questions and then helping them understand, hey, you don't have to give up these things, but you do have to work smarter rather than harder. So break them up a little bit. You don't have to do all of them at one time. And so, or you don't have to sit on the ground for so long, or maybe we should get you a low back support belt. Let's get you exercises that you can do. My goal is to get you out of pain of what you came in for. But then I want to be able to empower you to understand what makes it better, what makes it worse, and help you have power over that so that you don't have to constantly just come in like that. They talk about like chiropractors wanting you to do maintenance care, keep coming back. The reason is because we can't cure you. And you're going to keep going back out and doing a lot of those same things. You're not going to change a lot. You may break it up a little bit. You may work a little bit smarter, but those things are going to happen and your body's accommodating and it's going back. So we talk to people about it that if you get an adjustment in maintenance care before you have the pain, then you don't have the pain. It's kind of like I go to the dentist to get my teeth cleaned, not because I like getting my teeth cleaned. I go to the dentist because I don't like root canals and I don't like crowns and all those things. So if I have a little ounce of prevention, because I know I'm not going to stop eating, that little ounce of prevention will help me be empowered to have some control over that. And I think that women in domestic violence situations, they need to be empowered to understand that they do have a say. They do have a voice. They do have a brain. They do have so much capability. I'm sure that you guys have seen some amazing cases where people have gone from rags to riches, and it's so humbling.
If you could be in an arena full of domestic violence victims, and when I say victims, I mean the people who are still in the cycle of violence, what would you say to them to prioritize their safety, their well-being, and to be able to take care of themselves still in that situation?
I'm going to be the person that's going to come out with 5,000 pamphlets and saying, okay, here's a resource, here's a resource, here's a resource.
Yes.
To be able to give them as many options that they can look at and what they feel comfortable. The biggest thing is that I would probably talk about myself and how I got through it and express my experience. Maybe, just maybe, some other woman would go, well, if she could do it, I can do it.
Within the 10 years that I lived with my abuser, twice physicians had figured it out. Even through my lying, no, I'm safe. Everything's good. Okay, but if you need to you, here's some resources. If you need to call, here's some resources. And I can tell you that was years apart. And I go back to those two people, two physicians who are very instrumental in my strategic escape even 10 years later. Because I thought about that. It's almost like maybe I am in an abusive relationship and I would lie to myself and everyone else. What you're doing is planting more seeds, I think, than you could ever realize. Because when my abuser said, I've gotten away with everything but murder, those two physicians within that 10 years came up in my mind. And then I thought it's time for me to plan my strategic escape with my children. Then I called Hope House and got to safety many, many years ago.
I think it's critical to be able to share your experience, strength, and hope. And that's generally what I have done in the past. If I think somebody is in an abusive environment, and they're not really talking with me, I have no problem with discussing and saying, if you have stuff like that, I can relate. This is what I went through. And I had to go to a shelter. And it was the scariest thing I ever did in my life. But for me, what motivates me is completely different than what motivates someone else. Me, I had no self-confidence, but as soon as SRS came in and said, if it happens again, they're going to come in and they're going to take my kid. That's when I stood up and I said, no more. This is not happening again. I will not let that happen to my child. And that's what motivated me. What motivates me, it may not motivate somebody else. I was just, how low does your elevator go until you finally say enough is enough? And it was the best thing that I ever did, was getting out of that situation.
I would say, too, that children are often the trigger point for leaving a situation. Heard from so many people that said, okay, abusing me, that's one thing, but when you start threatening with the kids, either to hurt the kids or they are hurting the kids, or the threat of your children being taken away, that's often the trigger point for someone to say, okay, there's my line, we've crossed the line, now it's time for me to go. And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot with our clients is, where's your line in the sand? What is it? So that you know that if that line gets crossed, then you know that this is what you're going to do. So when people are trying to help you or trying to help work through that situation, if you know what that line is, then you know what resources you need and what it will take. I wonder if we could go back just a minute and talk about, again, the body and how trauma presents itself in the body. Are there things that you look for that are those, oh my gosh, this is a red flag, I need to pay attention to this, when you're working with a client and know that they are in a domestic violence situation, or really any kind of traumatic situation, not necessarily just DV?
In the new patient exam, that's the first thing I'm looking at as far as if they show any trauma or anything like that. When you have physical trauma to the body, it puts the body in a fight or flight status, and then you're all sympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is going to tighten all the muscles down. They're going to have hypertonic muscles, that we call it. They're just really, really rock tight. They don't hold their adjustments. They are constantly, I'm a 9 out of 10 pain scale, and everything hurts. We had one lady, I can't go into great detail, obviously, but we had to make special arrangements for it because we had to have her come in when it was our least busiest time, and sometimes we would have her come in before we opened, because of if people would look at her for very long or anything like that, or if they would want to try to interact with her or ask her questions, she would have panic attacks and she'd just get up and she'd bolt. So we had to really treat with kid gloves with her and just have her come in at the off-peak hours and just try to keep just a very calm voice and try to be as soothing as possible, and then talking with them about what exactly is hurting, and then addressing those issues, and then reaffirming how is that feeling. Because when you ask them, it's really easy for a doctor to go boom, 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 okay, you're better, but who actually goes, okay, so I'm seeing that the neck is moving a lot better, how does that feel to you? And people don't realize that that's big for somebody that's been basically beaten down emotionally and spiritually and physically, getting their feedback onto it. You're constantly doing that with them, and then giving them suggestions on, okay, it hurts when it does this, let's try this. And you end up being a coach a lot of times to be able to help be on the solution side instead of the problem side. I can't fix your situation. I can give you resources, I can help to try to get to the solution, and I can help you get out of pain, but I can't fix the reason why it's happening.
Does the body hold trauma or pain in certain areas that you've noticed when you you are treating anyone with trauma?
Yes. I have found that just stress in general, trauma, all of that, call it you're wearing your shoulders as earrings. And we tend to go into kind of a protective mode. We turtle because that's like a protective mode. So we'll find people that'll have a lot of common neck problems, a lot of neck pain. They tend to dive into their phone a lot, to TikTok and all these things. So they're always looking down. And believe it or not, your head weighs 8 to 15 pounds. I mean, it's all brains, but it's like holding a bowling ball forward. And then I have people going, I have no idea why I have neck pain. And they're walking around like,
I never thought of that, but that's so true.
It is. And so those muscles just get put into overdrive. Tend to see that I see that probably with 70% of my patients that come in. But the patients that start to show there's just pain everywhere, it's not getting better, or they've got bruises, things like that, then that starts giving me more tips and I can start putting it together. Every time they come in, I'm asking them, okay, so is it better, same, or worse? Is it frequent? Is it dull, achy, sharp, stabbing? Does this activity of daily living still bother it? Can you go a longer period of time of sitting without your neck bothering you? So it's all very feedback with them.
What about quality of sleep?
Quality of sleep. So if you're in pain, you tend to not sleep very well. When people come to me and they say, I always ask them what makes it better, what makes it worse. Part of our protocols of what we ask. And so when they say that it's worse in the morning or it's worse when they sleep, then I'm like, I can help really quickly with that. How are you sleeping? Side, back, or stomach? Sometimes a simple pillow underneath the knees or in between the knees when they're sleeping, or finding out, are they sleeping with a double stack of pillows, and then they wonder why they have neck pain because they're sleeping with their head and their chin tucked. If you're not getting enough sleep, then it's a vicious cycle. Then it goes back to the neurological side, because if you're not getting enough sleep, then that feeds back to exhaustion, and then it feeds back to emotional exhaustion. I always talk about emotional, spiritual, and physical. That's a huge impact for all of us to be healthy. It's just it snowballs. So if you can get rid of some of that pain or find out, is it a mattress? Sometimes you can solve that stuff with like a pillow and things like that. And you don't have to spend all of that money, but you have to ask the questions and get the feedback from them. And once again, I'm trying to live on that solution side for them and help give them options of what they can do.
What message of hope or encouragement would you like to offer survivors who may be listening to this podcast right now?
The first thing is never give up. Never give up. There's always a way. We may not realize it, but there's always a way. It's just sometimes it takes time to find those things. Remembering that you're stronger than you give yourself credit. And remembering that all you have is time. We want to try to make this different now, but it's a process. You have to, from the domestic violence side, I'm speaking from my own personal experience, you have to get into the shelters. You have to get yourself completely reestablished. Very traumatic for your family and everything, just uprooting and all of that. There's a lot of trauma just emotionally going on there, and getting away from that person. It's terrifying. And the women that do that are so strong. And then once they get out of that, you can get the therapy. There is no excuse why you cannot get the therapy. There are so many resources that don't cost any money, and you can work on yourself, because they say, Mama, you are no good to your kids if you aren't good. If you don't feel good, physically or mentally, you have to take care of yourself. And as women, we tend to not. To us, it's like a 2 out of 10 is good compared to childbirth. I can deal with this. People don't come into me because they have pain. They come into me because of their activities of daily living have now been interrupted. They can't lift their kid and put him into the bathtub now. They had the pain for 2 years, but now it's gotten to that point. The other thing is you get yourself out of that situation to take charge. It's hard. I was in my second husband. I had 1 year left of my degree in mathematics. He refused to allow me to go back to school to get that 1 year. To be accurate, he told me as long as I could bring in $40,000 to $50,000 a year, then he would be more than happy to let me go back to school. I'm not sure what my thought process was, other than it's like, oh, so I have to get permission. You're not going to let me. This isn't a joint relationship. I have to ask for permission. And I can tell you that as soon as I got out of that relationship, the first thing I did is I went back to school. And anybody that says that they don't have the money, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the resources, tells me that they're just not ready yet. Because once they get ready to do that, there are so many resources out there to get that education. And that's my big thing, is educate. Get yourself that degree. Because if you get the degrees and you get a career, you're not dependent on anybody to support your children. You're not dependent on anybody other than yourself.
What you said is about the strength of survivors is something I have said my entire career. I've been at Hope House for a very long time. And that is something that if you survive domestic violence and you make it through, even if you don't ever leave the situation, even if you're in that for years and years and years, the strength it takes to survive that is amazing to me. We often label people who have been in domestic violence situations as weak, and nothing could be further from the truth, because if you live through that and you survive it, even if you're still in it, you are surviving it. The strength it takes to be able to do that every day is amazing, and I think we need to recognize that. And you have shared that as well, that it just takes an astronomical amount of strength to be able to navigate through those relationships. That's how we should be presenting, rather than saying, oh, they're weak and this only happens to people who are weak. That nothing could be further from the truth.
Oh, that is such a misnomer and a myth. Absolutely.
Domestic violence is non-discriminatory. It affects people that are all socioeconomic status. I've seen people that have no education. I've seen people have PhDs, and the same thing happens. And sometimes these people don't present themselves in the beginning of the relationship. You think, okay, this person's okay. It's a matter of being educated and understanding the signs.
And that isn't about their strength or their abilities, or it's about the obstacles that are in their way. And if we can continue to address the obstacles, then it makes it that much easier for someone to be able to say, okay, now I see what's going on and I can access the resources that are available to me and then make decisions. Sometimes leaving isn't the right answer. It may not be the right answer at that particular moment, or it could be maybe not ever for them. But that doesn't mean that they don't find resources to help them heal and cope with what's going on. So I think that's what we're about. We are about how do we help people address the obstacles that are in their past. So we walk alongside them. We don't do it for them. We don't decide what people should do. We don't make decisions for them, nor do you. You offer resources. You offer things that take those obstacles out of the way. And then when they're ready to make a decision, they make the decision for themselves. That's really what it's about. It's about empowering people to decide what's okay for them and what's not okay. What are their goals? What do they want to see happen? And then we're just there walking along with them to support them, offer resources, or maybe we'll help get that big old rock that's in the middle of the road, we'll help them get it out of the way so they can proceed forward. Domestic violence is about power and control. And how can we keep power and control over the person that we're in the relationship with? When you get them so low, when you beat them down so much where they have no confidence in themselves, no thought that they have any worth, that becomes a very powerful tool to keep someone in that space, because a lot easier to control them in that situation. And that's what happens. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a period of time, where you can have someone who starts out with a strong sense of self, who after a period of time is like, what happened to me? Where did I go? I've lost myself. And we hear that so much. And that's what we say. Our job is to help people find their voice again. It's to help them reclaim who they are and who they were, being able to say, okay, I am worthy. I can take up space.
It is so amazing how in the beginning of a domestic violent relationship, the fog rolls in, rolls out. And then the fog eventually, because of the cycle, it'll settle. Then it's foggy all the time. There's no rolling out anymore. And it's almost like your body goes into that fight or flight like you talked about. But sometimes that fight or the flight never goes away, because the bear in the woods is running at you, is always at home. So that does take such a toll on your body. You, being a physician, being a chiropractor, are a safe space. And I think after this podcast, everyone who's going to listen to this globally is going to know that you're a safe space. And I think we need more safe spaces like that. Tell me where you're located. GBC is located, both of your locations.
I started Rain Valley Chiropractic in 2017. I did not have a business loan, and I actually had a table in my car, and I was portable chiropractic because I could not get a business loan because I did not own a home. But I went to 18 Bank and applied for a small business loan, and I got turned down 18 times. But I was determined. And I kept on going to people's homes. And from May 2nd, 2017 to August 1st, I was able to open up my first actual office, 900 square feet. And my daughter joined me. And we have just grown and grown. And after about a year, my daughter went to go to open her own practice. And I helped her with that out in Oak Grove. I'm at Oak Grove Chiropractic. So,
Shout out to Oak Grove Chiropractic.
and so I've just continued to grow. We see probably anywhere from about, I'd say, 50 to 80 patients a day in our Green Valley office. And I opened up the Independence office right off of 291 and 24 Highway. Great area. I couldn't call it Green Valley Chiropractic because it's in Independence, so I named it GVC Chiropractic of Independence. And it's a nice location there. We have the exact same protocols, everything that we do. It's very much a safe space for people and make sure that, people feel wanted.
I can tell you, I appreciate your empathy and I appreciate your story. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.